with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Senior political reporter for The Washington Post and author of the Campaign Moment newsletter, Aaron Blake, is here. Also joining us, political strategist and MSNBC senior analyst Matt Dowd is back. And with me here at the table for the hour, president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation, right here on MSNBC, the Reverend Al Sharpton's here. Aaron Blake, take me through the fate of the Hegseth nomination and tell me what, if anything, is working in his favor at this point, because it feels like a whole lot of headwind and not much headway.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see right now, although I would say that, Joni Ernst is setting herself up to be a pretty decisive figure in all this. She said some very skeptical things about him. If you look at her comments and you read between the lines, you could understand that as suggesting to Donald Trump that maybe it's time to go for somebody else. She's talking openly about the idea that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis would maybe be a better pick for this office. But also you have a situation in which she's setting herself up, if she did come around to Pete Hegseth somehow, where she could potentially pull other Republican senators along with her. Now, whether that would be sufficient is anybody's guess. I think a lot of these senators are truly waiting for whatever might come out of something like an FBI background check to see if this is somebody they can ultimately support. They don't want to commit too early because they don't know what's going to come. And so I think everybody's just kind of taking a wait and see approach right now. But a lot of people clearly would prefer that this was a lot easier than trying to confirm somebody like Pete Hegseth.
I mean, what's interesting about the appetite now for a background check is that the background check isn't meant to replace a confirmation process. It's their job to ask questions. The background check is simply to make sure that the nominee isn't a target for potential blackmail. I mean, the oath that you take after you're sworn in is to the United States of America. What exactly is Susan Collins looking for in the FBI background check, Aaron Blake?
Well, I mean, you could look at this as them making sure that there aren't other allegations that have been made against him in the past, like the alleged sexual assault that we saw in 2017. You could look at this as them seeing if there is more to these reports about his alleged abuse of alcohol, his treatment of women. Basically, this is them trying to get the fuller picture of everything in his past. And you're right, from that point on, it is up to them to ask questions about these things and go beyond that report. But I think that provides kind of the basis point for them to really have those conversations. And that's the point at which they'll decide whether they want to actually entertain this in a situation in which it actually gets to these confirmation hearings, which I think is a really big question right now.
Aaron Blake, I want to read a little bit from your reporting on this. If Hegseth's pick is withdrawn, it would mark a second high-profile loss for Trump after his Attorney General pick, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, lasted just 8 days. That would be highly unusual. The emerging question is what that says about Trump's political capital, with still a month and a half until he's actually sworn in. Newly elected presidents have seen their cabinet picks fail, but generally not for two marquee posts, and generally not this quickly. Perhaps the play here is to shoot for the moon and see what he can get and then fall back on more confirmable picks if need be. But Trump also has his political capital to mind at a crucial juncture. That means there was and is a premium on bringing his party to heel. A sufficient number of Senate Republicans are demonstrating that they can stand up to Trump and apparently don't fear the consequences too much. And you could forgive them for feeling emboldened to do it more going forward. Tell me if your own analysis is that this is a factor of senators who for 9 years have been anything but courageous and willing to stand up to Trump, and they suddenly are different, or if it's that these picks are so manifestly unsuited for the jobs they've been tapped to fill.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of those two things. There's no question that Donald Trump, after he was elected, on election night, he was talking about the idea that he had a historic and powerful mandate. Well, we know now that he didn't even win a majority of the popular vote. Republicans won the House by a relatively small margin. They won the Senate largely because they won in red states. So this was not a huge affirmation of the Republican Party necessarily, but that doesn't mean that that's not the message that Donald Trump took away from this, that he doesn't believe he got this huge mandate. And so he went with a number of picks that the people around him had to know were going to challenge these Republican senators, even in ways that they weren't necessarily challenged in his first term. And so if you're a Republican senator and you're looking at that, there is definitely some pain to be experienced if you are going to stand up to Donald Trump, at least theoretically. But also they need to be asking themselves what the tone being set is. If they sign off on these picks that they are clearly uncomfortable with early on before he's actually, inaugurated as president, is that going to just lead to him doing all kinds of things that are going to make them uncomfortable moving forward? And whatever you think about these Republican senators, a lot of them have, concerns about who might be running the Defense Department. They have, concerns about who might be Attorney General. These are big jobs that have really big impacts. And so these are things that matter to them. And so if there are things on which they could stand up to Trump and maybe take some political risks, I think these are some of those things. And we're seeing that to some degree.
Hope springs eternal that you are right. Matt Dowd, your thoughts?
Well, I have a couple of things. And first, Trump's statement that you read is not as bolstering to Pete Hegseth as I think many people think. When he describes him as things are going very well, that is a very toned down version of Donald Trump. And then his last line, I think, is telling when he said he's a winner, basically, no matter what anybody says about him, leading you to the conclusion that if he pulled back or Donald Trump switches, then he can still say he was a winner. I mean, I actually think that was tepid. That was an exceedingly tepid bolstering of him in the course of this. I also think that this FBI background check could actually give Pete Hegseth a little bit of a breather, because it allows these senators who, as we've seen over the course of the last few years, don't have a lot of courage to sort of say, okay, I'm going to take a look. But I want to see the FBI background check. And so that, we're 18 days or 17 days till Christmas. It gives them an ability to sort of like pull back and not have to, take a stand in the middle of this. And I would say, yes, they've shown some courage, but their political chips really haven't been into the table yet, because Matt Gaetz didn't push it to a vote. So nobody really had to stand up fundamentally to him. They just signaled to him quietly. And the same is true so far for Pete Hegseth. So I think what these 6, 7, or 8 Republicans, as Aaron has talked about, are doing is they don't want him to be the Secretary of Defense, but they also simultaneously don't want to vote against the Trump nominee. And so they're hoping, because they live in fear, they're hoping the problem takes care of itself, so they don't have to buck up and take on Donald Trump in the course of this. And as I say, I think the sort of potential FBI background checks gives them some space where they can sort of hold their powder and wait until after the first of the year, and hopefully the problem takes care of itself in the interim.
I mean, I think, Matt Dowd, there's also enough reporting that makes clear that to Donald Trump, none of these people, well, with the exception of a couple, but not including Hegseth, mean that much to him personally. I mean, he gave him the job. If it had been easy, it would have been fine. He'd be there. But he's already interviewing a backup. He's, according to 4 sources, he's in advanced talk. That's how they're described with Ron DeSantis. He likes the jockeying for attention and to be tapped. And he likes sort of watching the sink or swim of all this. That doesn't chafe him or bother him.
No, I mean, and this is consistent both in his professional and his personal life. I mean, Donald Trump in every situation starts a relationship with somebody before the current relationship is over. I mean, he's not somebody that is stuck on an island and then swims in the ocean to the next island. He wants the next island pushed next to him so he can just jump right to it so he doesn't have to deal with it. That's what he does here. I mean, if what I don't understand is the loyalty, and again, I think it's not really loyalty, it's more out of fear many people have to him, because in Donald Trump's world and in Donald Trump's life, every single person is expendable. Every single person is expendable if it doesn't serve his purposes here. And so anybody that thinks Donald Trump has some dual loyalty or shared loyalty, that I'm going to go through a hard time and Donald Trump will go through a hard time for me, there's no evidence that Donald Trump will go through a hard time for anyone.
I want to show you what the exception might be, Rev, based on some reporting in the Bulwark. They're writing this about Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. Quote, Gabbard's and Kennedy's nominations, like Pete Hegseth's and Kash Patel's, have met resistance in pockets of the Senate. But Trump allies view the stakes differently. Confirming Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy is seen as an opportunity for the president-elect to cement his legacy of broadening the Republican coalition to include disaffected Democrats and independents. They note that the two are considered blue MAGA rock stars among the Trump faithful. They're both loved by the new influential podcasters whom Trump courted this election and give Trump the chance to burnish his anti-establishment bona fides. The thing about Trump is, for Trump, it's never been enough to have the conservative media sort of as mega fans, right? It's never been adequate. And it's an interesting bit of reporting in the Bulwark that with Kash Patel and with Hegseth, sure, you animate the I don't even know if Patel is a Fox star. Hegseth is an actual star on that network. Kash Patel is a figure sort of in the Bannon media ecosystem. But Trump is interested in these folks with crossover appeal.
I think that is right. I think that you must remember Trump, more than anything, is a performer. And the performance and the optics mean a lot more to him than the policy. And I think that Hegseth and Matt Gaetz are all, maybe they happen, maybe they don't. But his stars, the guys that would perform right before the main act if we were in Vegas, are Robert Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard. And I think that if those two are shot down, the optics of that hurts the whole MAGA revolution, because they, more than anybody, represent the disruption that he promised. Now, I don't think either one of them are capable of doing their jobs any more than I think that Hegseth is. But I think it doesn't matter. It's the optics, it's their disruptive kind of ideology, and the fact that they are so unsettling to Democrats is what he wants to send that message. So he'll sacrifice 2 or 3 people to hold his stars in line. Now, in a year, he may throw them to the wolves, but he wants to be able to say to his crowd, I told you, I gave him Robert Kennedy, who will disrupt health care, who will stop vaccines, Gabbard, who they're saying is with the Russians. That is the ultimate, I delivered on you, so I can do 10 things that I told you I wouldn't do, and I'll do it anyway. Because it's all about optics with him. Yeah. It's the performance, it's not the policy.
Casting. The casting.
It's all about casting.
Matt Dowd, we talked earlier in the week after Hegseth's interview on Megyn Kelly about drinking. Let me show you what Donald Trump's nephew, Fred Trump, said about alcohol and alcohol abuse yesterday.
I've heard Hegseth say, oh, I'm going to stop drinking if I become Secretary of Defense. As I said before, is it that simple? If it was that simple that everybody wanted to stop drinking, they'd stop drinking. It's a dangerous thing to have a guy like that running the largest bureaucracy maybe on the planet. I think it's just too damn dangerous.
Matt Dowd, just picking up on our conversation about this topic before, of all the things that Trump does not find disqualifying, allegations of sexual abuse, allegations of sexual assault, allegations of financial mismanagement, allegations of